Perfect. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for a training on the basics of equitable services to non-public schools. Please ensure that your microphones are turned off and be aware that this training is being recorded. Any questions typed in the chat box will be addressed at the end of the slides. I'm Chantel Carter, the non-public ombudsman as authorized under ESEA. I have with me today Lisa Huckins, an education program specialist. We both work in the Office of Federal Programs. Our office programmatically handles questions regarding equitable services under Titles 1, 2A, 3, 4A, and now the Elementary and Secondary School Relief Fund, or ESSER, and Emergency Assistance to Non-Public Schools, or EANS. The Office for Exceptional Children handles non-public equitable services questions related to IDEA, and our area fiscal coordinators handle non-public state funding questions related to administrative cost reimbursement and auxiliary services. If you have questions regarding auxiliary services or IDEA, you will need to address those with the appropriate offices. I'm now going to turn the presentation over to Lisa.
Thanks, Chantel. Because it's the largest program, and I think we can go then, oh, never mind, you already got it there. Because it's the largest program, today's discussion will mainly revolve around Title I equitable services. We'll look at how equitable service amounts are calculated, what should be included during consultation, how services should be provided, what options a district has in the provision of equitable services, and what documentation will be necessary for compliance purposes. We'll finish the training by responding to your questions, which you can submit in the chat box. In October of 2019, the U.S. Department of Education released updated Title I equitable service guidance. If you haven't had the opportunity to read this guidance, we highly encourage you to download and read it. It's written in an easy question and answer format. It's also a good idea to provide the guidance to non-public schools you work with. Many of the Title I questions we receive in our office are questions that can be answered straight from the guidance. You can find the guidance in our CCIP document library. Often we get the question, why do public districts have to provide services at non-public schools? Section 1117 of the Every Student Succeeds Act requires services to non-public schools on an equitable basis. So what does that mean, on an equitable basis? The services provided to non-public students should be equitable to those available to public school students. For Title I, that means that funding is based on the number of low-income children who reside in a public Title I served building attendance area, but attend a non-public school. And non-public students from Title I served buildings are eligible for services based on academic need. For Title I, it doesn't matter if the non-public school is located within your district boundaries or in another district. What does matter is which public building their students would have attended. To be eligible for Title I services at a non-public school, the children must live in a public building attendance area that's served with Title I. If you have 3 elementary schools in your district, but only provide Title I services at 2 of those buildings, children residing in the attendance area of the 3rd unserved building are not eligible for Title I services. If you do not serve your high schools with Title I, non-public high school students from your district would not receive equitable services. Students don't have to be low income to receive services, but low income student counts are used to determine the amount of equitable Title I services available to a non-public school. Excuse me. The most common way for non-public schools to identify low-income students' status is the National School Lunch Program forms. If the non-public school participates in this program, they'll have forms that have been completed by parents for free or reduced price lunch. Many non-public schools do not participate in this program. For those schools, the Ohio Household Income Verification Form should be used. You can find this form under the User Manuals and Forms tab in the Non-Public Data System, or NPDS. The federal guidance allows, excuse me. The federal guidance allows for other methods of identification, but they get a little more complicated. I'm sorry, I am fighting a cough this morning and I can't get rid of it. To find the Ohio Household Income Verification Form, you're going to log into NPDS, which is one of the tiles under your OHID, and click on the User Manuals and Forms menu button in NPDS. The form is updated each year to be in alignment with the National School Lunch Program. Non-public school principals should collect and have this documentation readily available. It's best practice to distribute these forms to parents at the beginning of the school year. A special note about low-income identification for this year. Because of the pandemic, all children may have been receiving free lunch. This does not mean the non-public school can report all children as free lunch. They still must have current year income documentation showing income levels below the free or reduced price limits. The guidance does allow for districts to collect low-income counts every 2 years. In consultation with your non-public schools, you could agree to have them report the same counts they reported in last year's NPDS. District counts in the FY22 consolidated application will be from October 2019. In Ohio, our data systems interface to calculate and display equitable service amounts for districts. Non-public principals enter data in NPDS, and that data is used by CCIP in the equitable service calculations. The period is currently open for non-public principals to do this reporting in NPDS. We're not going to cover the NPDS system today, but CCIP Note 467 was released when the system opened. I would encourage you to read through the user manual and instructions. If you have questions, please reach out to us. It's essential that public districts verify the information non-public school principals are entering into the system. There's nobody else that verifies these counts. Every incorrect count equals the equivalent of funding being earmarked to a school that's not eligible. If I were going to verify the counts in NPDS, I'd ask the non-public school principal for the addresses of the children reported in NPDS. I'd want to ensure that their addresses fall within the public building attendance area that the non-public school principal has identified. Sometimes district lines are very close, and it may be difficult to determine which public building the child would be attending if not enrolled in the non-public school. I'd also want to know the low-income status, how the low-income status was determined so that I could ensure that the non-public was using a valid method to determine free and reduced lunch equivalent students. While it's awesome that our systems calculate and display the equitable service amounts for you, many states don't have that. An auditor would expect the district to understand how these calculations were made. The set-aside displayed in CCIP was calculated by creating a proportion of the total number of low-income children enrolled in non-public schools reported to Title I served attendance areas over the total number of all low-income children, public and non-public, who reside in Title I served attendance areas. There's a document in the CCIP document library called District Calculation of Title I-A Equitable Service Amounts that explains the process in more detail. That's a little light reading for you. In CCIP, on the Title I set-aside page, you'll see the total district non-public set-aside. If your district receives more than $500,000 in Title I, you'll also see 1% of that district set-aside that should be earmarked for parent engagement activities. When your federal programs consultant reviews your application, this is the amount they'll expect to see budgeted on the non-public line of the budget. Keep in mind, the amount displayed here is only the current year service amount. It doesn't include your carryover. The Title I non-public school service page also displays the amount of equitable services for each non-public school. The district set-aside is divided amongst the participating non-public schools by creating a per pupil amount. You can see that this page is divided with the non-public schools located within your district boundary at the top of the page and the non-public schools located in other districts at the bottom of the page. This page also displays both the FY21 service amount and any carryover from the prior year. The total column on the far right displays the total amount that's designated for each school. At a glance, this page provides a lot of information for your consultant. If any funded school is marked no to the "Are services provided" question, that will prompt a conversation before your CCIP application may be approved. If funds are generated for a non-public school, services must be provided at a non-public school. Your consultant can also see the status of your consultation guide. At this point in the year, the consultation guides should be marked non-public approved. That indicates that the district has met their consultation obligation and the non-public school principal agrees with what was written in the NPDS electronic consultation guide. At the top of the non-public school service page, there's a download non-public data link. This will generate an Excel file of the data that was reported in NPDS, as well as the PPA and total allocation amount. This is a very informative file and allows you to view your data without having to go back into the NPDS system. Everything we've talked about so far has been for chartered non-public schools. Chartered non-public schools report data in the NPDS system, and the systems automatically calculate equitable services. Non-chartered, non-tax supported schools are also eligible to participate in federal programs, but they don't automatically report in NPDS. Districts must reach out to non-chartered, non-tax schools that are located in their districts to determine if they want to participate. You can find the list of non-chartered, non-tax schools on the ODE website after searching those key terms. An Excel file for school year 2021 is available for download. The list can be sorted by county so you can find schools in your area. And if a school wants to participate, they need to contact Chantel as soon as possible so she can set up their access to NPDS and they can report their student data. Now I'm going to turn the presentation over to Chantel.
Thank you, Lisa. An LEA must consult with private school officials during the design and development of the LEA's Title I program. The goal of consultation is agreement between the LEA and the appropriate private school officials on how the district will provide equitable services and effective programs for eligible private school children. There are many areas of consultation. In February, the non-public data system opened for non-public schools to enter their federal participation data. During that time, districts should contact all of their non-public schools to discuss possible participation in federal programs in FY22 or school year 21-22. By the time NPDS closes in May, districts should have reviewed the non-public low income and resident data that Lisa talked about earlier. During this time, districts should also be evaluating the impact of their current programs and reviewing spending to make sure funds from the current year have been fully expended. If extenuating circumstances have caused the district to not expend the full amount, they'll need to consult with the non-public school to plan for any funds that need to be carried forward. Once districts receive their allocations in June, they should contact the participating non-public schools and let them know the amount of equitable services that will be available to them. Knowing those dollar amounts allows for a more detailed discussion of what services will be provided and should allow the district to complete the consultation guide with a solid plan for the next school year. It's during this time that contracts should be entered into for services. As the school year progresses, consultation should involve regular check-ins between the district and their non-public schools to ensure that planned services are being provided and tracked, and parent engagement activities are happening, and funds are expended as being planned, and changes to the consultation guide are made if necessary. Next slide, please. The consultation guide in NPDS is meant to capture and document the conversations between the district and the non-public school. The consultation guide itself does not demonstrate compliance to timely, meaningful, and ongoing consultation. We would expect additional documentation in the event of a compliance review. Things like quarterly meeting agendas, phone logs, and emails may be used. Consultation guides should have been marked in progress during your initial consultations that are happening right now in FY22. only public school users can start the consultation guide. So this is a public school responsibility. When your FY22 CCIP funding application is submitted to your consultant after July 1st, they would expect the consultation guides should be marked completed. When you're budgeting non-public funds, the only way to know how to correctly budget them is if you've provided consultation with your non-public school. Any consultation guide that's not marked complete by the start of school will hold up the approval of your application. Once you've updated this consultation guide status to complete, non-public principals will be able to mark the consultation guide non-public approved, indicating that they agree that the guide accurately reflects the programs that have been designed for their school. It is important to realize that even though the Title I program is administered at the non-public school, it is a public district responsibility. The public district must maintain control of the funds in all contracts and procurement. The primary intent of Title I is to improve the academic achievement of children that are at risk of not meeting the state's academic content standards. Any services at a non-public school must be secular in nature, be allowable under the grant, and meet an identified non-public school need. Section B8 from the guidance lays out options for providing services to non-public schools. Most districts and schools use the school-by-school option. Our NPDS and CCIP systems interface to calculate and display the amount of equitable services for each private school. Lisa showed you that page of CCIP earlier. If the CCIP displays $4,000 for Title I equitable services for St. John, then the district is responsible for providing $4,000 worth of Title I services at St. John's. This is the way that most districts provide equitable services. There are a few other options though. Pooling within an LEA is when non-public schools decide they want to pool their Title I funds to be distributed among those non-public schools according to need. Columbus City is a good example of this. The Catholic schools within Columbus City Schools pool their Title I funds. Then in consultation with the non-public school principals, as well as the Columbus Diocese, each non-public school receives a service amount based on their need. Each school may receive more or less Title I services because the needs of the individual schools are taken into account. The last option is a new option for districts since the updated guidance in October of 2019. Pooling across LEAs is beneficial when you have a non-public school that receives equitable service amounts from several districts. In this option, the Title I funds from several districts for a single non-public school are pooled into one pot of money. One district, usually the district where the non-public school is located, though it doesn't have to be, hires the teacher to provide Title I service. That teacher rank orders all of the children from each district that contributed to the pool, and children are served in order of academic need, regardless of the district they reside in or how much Title I funds were generated by their resident district. It is possible that a district may generate funding and contribute to the pool, but their children not receive services. It is important to note, the Title I service in the non-public school setting is not for everyone. If a district does not generate a Title I service allocation, then services may not be provided to children from that district. In this last option, a memorandum of understanding or MOU must be in place between districts. The MOU should clearly outline the expectations and responsibilities, including if pooling across LEAs will be occurring. Without pooling language in your MOUs, we would expect the district providing Title I services would have documentation to demonstrate that the $4,000 of services generated by a neighboring district was actually provided to children from that district only. We've often asked about the pros and cons of pooling across LEAs, especially since this is a new topic. There are pros and cons, and it's best to engage in consultation with your non-public school, as well as the districts that may be involved, to determine if it will work for you to pool across LEAs in your situation. If you're not pooling funds, your service provider should be able to provide fiscal records and time and effort logs that demonstrate the amount of service that was provided exclusively to students from your district. This is easiest with single district tutoring blocks and determining the cost of a tutoring block based on the salary of the teacher. It is important to realize there's no guarantee that Title I services will last the entire year. Once Title I funds have been expended, there are no longer funds available for Title I funded supports. Whether you are pooling or not, funds may not be commingled with auxiliary funds or funds from any other source, such as a federal grant. So we have a non-public school that generated Title I funds. What are our district's options for serving that school? Option 1, your district can hire a properly licensed teacher to travel to the non-public school to deliver services. Properly licensed means a regular licensed teacher, not an intervention specialist license or a substitute license or a non-tax license. The grade band and subject area must be in alignment with the services that are being provided. Option number 2, your district can hire a properly licensed non-public school teacher outside of their contracted day. This could be for services before or after school, during the summer, or on days of the week that a non-public school teacher doesn't currently work, or even part of the day that she's not under contract with a non-public school. Again, a non-tax license is not considered proper licensure for Title I services. Option 3, there are several third-party providers out there. Some are specific to specific regions of the state and some are statewide. A district could enter into a contract with one of those third-party providers to provide Title I service. Option 4, we've touched on a little bit, is to enter into a memorandum of understanding with a district that already has a Title I teacher assigned to the non-public school. The wording in your MOU should clearly reflect your expectations. If funds will be pooled, that language should be included. If funds will not be pooled, there must be fiscal documentation to demonstrate the amount of funds expended on children from your district. In all of these models, the compliance documentation comes from the service provider, not the non-public school. When you contract with an entity for Title I service, they must provide Title I documentation before your district should be paying any invoices. The non-public data system has a report link that will allow you to view all of the equitable service amounts generated for a non-public school. To generate this report, you would click on the non-public equitable services report link. It is important to note that this report is only available in NPDS if you've gone in from the non-public side. If you've gone in as a public district search, that report will not be there. So you'll want to switch the tab on the search screen and go in as a non-public school. As you can see, the report is for a single non-public school. In this case, it's John Paul II Catholic School. And this report will show the Title I equitable services amounts they've received from every district. The report also shows the amount of Title IIA and 4A funds they receive from their local district. This information can be very helpful when consulting with the non-public school regarding the service model that will best meet the needs and options like pooling. It's also necessary information for your partners in pooling, MOU, or third-party contract arrangements. Often we get requests for memorandum of understanding templates. We will not provide a template because all a memorandum of understanding is the terms that the two districts have agreed upon. So the wording in your MOU should clearly reflect your expectations. When will compliance documentation be provided? How often will the district providing services invoice the other districts? How will funds be pooled? During a compliance visit, we'll rely heavily on the terms that were agreed to in the MOU. Remember, as the district that generates the equitable service obligation, it is your responsibility to ensure a quality Title I program is in place, regardless of whom is delivering the services. We have had compliance issues in instances where there was an MOU in place, but the district with the review was unable to produce documentation in a timely manner. Now, I will say, we won't provide you a template, but if you ask me for some best practices MOUs that we've collected, we do have those that districts have said we can share out. So we do have those. On the next slide, you'll see the clause in a sample MOU with the pooling language. Districts who want to exercise pooling should have a similar statement in the MOU. This statement comes straight from the updated Title I guidance that Lisa mentioned earlier. The district of service and the district of residence agree after consultation to pool Title I funds. Children will be selected based on uniform criteria of educational need. The lowest achieving eligible private school children, regardless of whether they reside in the district of service or district of residence, and without regard to how much funds children from low income families within their private school generate towards the pool, will receive services. Eligible low achieving children may receive Title I services even if their school has few children from low income families who generate Title I. That's one of the pros of using the pooling model. The children who are most at need receive those services, whether or not their district generated enough to provide service to all of those children. Next slide. If you plan to enter into an MOU for the delivery of Title I services, this decision should be made now. Now meaning once you have your application in June and you have the staffing levels, that's when you want to decide and enter into that MOU. When you submit your consolidated application, you should already know who your non-public school providers are and have started the process of getting contracts or MOUs approved. Non-public equitable services should be in place at the start of the school year. In consultation with your non-public schools, you should plan a program that will fully expend your FY22 service amount and any FY21 carryover that you may have. Remember, there is a 10% cap on supplies and equipment. In addition to academic supports, Title I funds may be used for social emotional supports, parent engagement, and professional development. Plan a program to fully expend those funds in the year in which they are awarded. The language in your MOU dictates everything. Who is responsible for purchasing parent engagement materials or supplies? I would recommend that the district that generated the funds being responsible for that and only entering into an MOU for actual teacher time. That way, any equipment purchase belongs to the district that generated the funds, not another district. We've already talked about, regardless of the delivery method for Title I, you have to maintain the same compliance documentation. During a compliance review, we look for the following items: multi-criterion forms for each grade level served, rank order list. If you are pooling, we would expect to see children from every district on that list. And if you're not pooling, we would expect districts to have their own rank order list. Sample school parent compact, evidence of parent engagement, and teacher schedules and service lists. Many of these items will be available at the beginning of the school year. Next slide. Everything we've talked about so far is Title I. Title I service follows the child. Lisa talked about that earlier. It doesn't matter where the non-public school is located. If the children live in your district, you are responsible for those services. Title I services follow the student regardless of non-public school location. Title IIA, Title III, and Title IV equitable services must be provided to the non-public schools located within your bounds, regardless of where the children live. So it's two very different situations. You may be a district that doesn't have any non-public schools located in your bounds, so you're not obligated to provide 2, 3, or 4, but you still may have Title I that will follow those children outside of your district. The Title IIA and 4A equitable service amounts are calculated by creating a proportion of the total number of children enrolled in non-public schools over the total number of children educated within the bounds of the district. The total amount is displayed on the Title IIA and Title IVA budget details pages. It is important to note that if a district budgets funds on the governance line of the budget, those funds are taken off the top before equitable services are calculated. That's another big difference between Title I and Title IIA. So if you are budgeting money on the governance line in 2A and 4A, you want to do that first before you start consulting with the amount that's generated in the system, because the system will generate a much larger amount that will be reduced if you go back and budget on that governance line. Just as with the Title I non-public school service page, the 2A and 4A non-public school service page displays both the FY21 service amount as well as incoming carryover from that prior year. Again, we would not expect to see any non-public schools that generated an allocation have no selected for the "Are services being provided?" question. This is a snip of the Title IIA budget details page. This is a great place to see what kinds of activities are allowable from 2A in the non-public setting. You can see there are two columns. The second column that has the NP, that stands for non-public, and those are the activities that would be allowable in the non-public setting, provided it's secular and non-ideological in nature. A few exceptions: Title IIA may not be used in the non-public setting for class size reduction or paying substitute teachers. Those are not allowable with the non-public, but mostly everything else on the Title IIA page are allowable. The Title IVA budget details page is laid out as the same as Title IIA. The second column indicates the non-public school activities. Title IVA activities fall into three categories: well-rounded education, safe and healthy schools, and technology. Nearly everything that is allowable for a public district is allowable in the non-public school, again, provided it is secular and non-ideological in nature. That means if technology is used, or you're purchasing anything that needs to be tagged and inventoried, those items are property of the district, not the non-public school, but they are placed in the non-public school for use. For Title III, the equitable service amount is calculated based on the number of English learners that were reported in NPDS. We can see this amount displayed on the Title III non-public school service page. Public districts do have the responsibility to identify English learners enrolled in non-public schools within their district, regardless of where the children reside. Public districts must verify the number of English learners reported in NPDS to ensure the allocation amounts are correct. It is also important to note here, if a non-public school has English learners, but the district does not, or does not have enough to receive Title III, then there will be no equitable services under Title III because the district itself is not receiving those funds. So we get that question sometimes. Title III activities must be supplemental and not used to meet the civil rights obligation of the school. The allowable activities fall into the categories of activities that improve instruction of English learners, engage parents and families, and professional development for teachers. As mentioned at the beginning of our slideshow, the Office for Exceptional Children handles questions regarding equitable services under IDEA. And here we've provided Mark Linsky's contact information. And if you are looking for questions around administrative cost reimbursement or auxiliary services, on the next slide, you'll see area fiscal coordinators are the ones who answer those. And by going to the Ohio Department of Education homepage, typing in area coordinators, you'll get a nice list. Those are broken out by region, and it was too much to display on this page, so we just directed you to this screenshot from the website. And I think now we're ready for questions.
I think I'm ready, Chantel. I wore my spring green today because I completely failed at St. Patrick's Day yesterday, and I think it gave me my spring allergies early, so I'm good though, I can make it. Amy has a question from a conversation she had with the district yesterday, which is, what are the ramifications if a non-public says they do not want to ask their church members what their incomes are, so they don't collect household income forms?
That's a really good question. And we know that Title I is based on low income, right? So there has to be some manner of identifying the number of low income children that may be in attendance, because that's solely how Title I is generated. With that said, the actual Title I guidance that Lisa referenced earlier with the link does provide a number of ways to collect or generate that low income information. Normally, we would say use the Ohio Household Income Verification form that Lisa pointed you to. In this case, we could say that, and likely the non-public school would say, no, we don't want to collect anything at all. So the district is going to be engaged with that non-public school, probably, again, because consultation is really left to the district and the non-public school, not so much us coming in as the state and saying, do it this way. But an option that you would have is to look at proportionality. So in essence, you would look at where those children enrolled in the non-public school reside, determine if they are residing in a Title I served attendance area, and if they are, look at the income poverty percentage of those public buildings and apply that percentage to the number of children enrolled in the non-public school that are residing in those attendance areas. It's something that's pretty, I won't say complicated. It's not complicated. It does require more work than just filling out an Ohio household income form, and would require a greater amount of consultation between the non-public school and the district to make sure that they are generating an appropriate amount of Title I funding for their school.
We don't have any other questions in the chat right now that I'm seeing. Does anyone have questions they'd like to type in the chat, or we're not that huge of a group? You could open your mic even possibly and ask a question.
Well, this is Amy. I have a follow-up question.
Go for it.
A previous question. So this particular district that we're talking about, their school-wide or their district-wide poverty average is only like 6.5%. They have 3 TA buildings, but their percentages in those buildings are less than 10. So in this situation, do you feel like proportionality how would that pan out? Because
so it's going to be exactly the same. So they would need to look at the buildings where those kids live and literally make a list. And it's going to be a very small amount based on that poverty amount. But if they have at least one child, then they would generate at least one PPA, which again is going to be a small amount of service, but the district could show that they met their due diligence by applying proportionality to the situation. And maybe after seeing that, the non-public school might just be like, okay, it's not worth it for us to, move forward with this.
And that's typically what happens. But the question came up then, of course, what about ESSER funds? So that's a whole nother topic. Normally, the non-public in question just has said that it's not worth the paperwork, basically. But there's a new person in the non-public now that's doing consultation with the public district. So she's more interested, I guess, in pursuing some Title I funds. But this also had to do with ESSER 1 money too. So
I would be happy if the non-public school and the district wants help with taking a look at proportionality and coming up with a low income count. I could definitely work with them on that. So you can
Okay.
pass that along.
Sounds great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Again, you can type in the chat or you can open your mic, either way.
Okay, Amy again. Sorry. The link. So Lisa shared a link in the chat. I'm not seeing that. That address the proportionality, the different ways that.
It's in the Title I guidance. So earlier in the slides was a link to the updated Title I guidance, CCIP document library.
Yep, I see the slide presentation. So just I'll find that slide. Okay, thank you.
Or you can go to the document library and in the search box, just type Title I non-public guidance.
Okay, I was just going to send it to that district along with your contact.
So Chantel and Lisa, it's Diane. I'm sorry I was in late. I was with the SST directors on a meeting, and thanks for the information you provided to the non-publics. Were you able to give them any type of information on the ESSER 1 and 2 funds and the difference between what would be allowable things that they might be able to do at the public district that would not be allowable with the non-public district? So as they are consulting with them on these, they also understand that there's a difference between those two.
So we did not cover that. We covered really the basics of non-public equitable services within the general grants that we have, 1, 2, 3, and 4. We all know that ESSER equitable services are the responsibility of the district, and those equitable services were calculated following the rules of Title I, so Section 1117 of the law. And like Diane mentioned, there are things that you can do in your public buildings with ESSER funds that are not allowable in the non-public setting. We wouldn't expect to ever see any religious content. We know that all services provided at the non-public school should be secular and non-ideological. We also know that there should not be any permanent improvements to non-public school buildings. There are some good questions about meeting the test for ESSER equitable service. Does this service prepare for, prevent, and what's the other one?
Respond to.
Yes, thank you. Prepare for, prevent, and respond to coronavirus. So they really should be framing each of those expenditures with, is the activity going to answer yes to those questions, and is there a justification for that? Diane also mentioned ESSER 2, and we know that with ESSER 2, the equitable service obligation is not there. There's no responsibility of districts to provide equitable services out of ESSER 2, and instead we have the Emergency Assistance to Non-Public Schools program that is being administered out of our office, and that non-public schools will fill out an application directly to the state, and we will work with a service provider to ensure that they are getting services that are allowable under that fund.
Thanks. Thanks, Chantel. And we know that many of those things that you said that weren't allowable under ESSER 2 aren't allowable really underneath the others. Like, you know, all the materials have to be secular. You know, you can't, and no religious items. And something that comes up every year, and I'm sure our new federal programs coordinators are going to get this, is professional development. And we have a non-public that wants to send a group of their teachers to the Catholic Conference for Education. And what do? So you want to explain to them, if when that comes up, how they should proceed with that with the district?
Sure. So I will say that every conversation regarding expenditures and activities has to be based in need. So you should be having the conversation about what are the needs of the non-public school and how is this proposed activity addressing those needs. There has to be a link between those two. Once they've identified our teachers need professional development and we'd like to send them to the state Catholic conference that happens every year, sometimes new coordinators will be like, nope, I heard Chantel say no religious, that's not allowed. And that's not exactly the case. It gets a little bit more complicated with professional development. So if the professional development has an agenda, the conference has an agenda, and you, in consultation with the non-public school, can determine the sessions that the teachers are going to be going to and whether they are secular or religious in nature, you can determine the percentage that would be allowable to be charged back to Title IIA. And that same percentage would go for mileage reimbursement, meal reimbursement. If 80% of the conference was going to be secular, you could pay 80% of the registration, 80% of the mileage, 80% of the per diem. Now, there are some times when you look at the agenda that religion is entwined, like it is embedded in the entire professional development. In cases like that, if they're not able to separate out the secular from the religious, then that's a time where you would want to say this, we can't separate this out, so we're not going to be able to reimburse for any part of that. It's important to realize that anytime you deny a service to a non-public school, that you provide that in writing to them. So you are saying, these are the reasons why we're not going to allow this. And from my perspective, if you can root your justification in the guidance, that's going to just give you a little more, it's good with the relationship. Like the district is not just saying no to me because they're saying no, but here's the reason in the guidance why the district is not allowed to provide that service. I think that's helpful.
Thanks, Chantel. That also, and you made another good point in your earlier response, was as you're working with the districts in their consultation, that making sure that what they're asking for meets the intent and purpose of the ESSER fund. Well, that's the same type of question that they're going to want to ask as they work through their consultation on all the other funds. Are the things and what the non-public is wanting to do align with the intent and purpose of each of the funds? And you can always, as as a coordinator of a district, go back to that intent and purpose and ask the non-public to make that connection for you, especially when you're not seeing it. Put it back on them. And often, once they start viewing it in that light, they'll understand on their own, and you don't have to tell them no, because they usually will say, yeah, I can see where that might be an issue. Let's see what else we can do with these funds.
Piggybacking on that, once the one needs assessment started to come out, I started to get questions from non-public schools like, hey, are we going to have to do this one needs assessment? And that should be taken care of during consultation. And the very first question, well, now the second question, because the first question is the school nonprofit, but the second question now gets to what are the needs of the non-public school in each of these grant areas. So it is something that not only should you be talking about, but it should be written in the consultation guide as well. And as we are heading into compliance season, one of the things that I will do in a compliance review is go into NPDS, read through the consultation guide, and then compare it to how the budget is, how the money is budgeted, what's described on the budget details page, and then what I actually hear from the non-public school principal. And all of those things should be in alignment with one another.
Thank you, Chantel. Correct. Everything should be grounded back into their needs and the intent and purpose of those funds. So, and I'm going to throw another little wrench that they're going to see. And this is something that just came along with the reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. they may get an invoice or a request for a purchase order from an entity that appears to be a religious organization. However, in some cases, what is being requested and asked for may be okay or appropriate with these funds. Can you explain or describe how and in what situations that might occur?
Perfect. So Diana's right. Our compliance visits used to be really easy because if reviewing the fiscal records, we would see a religious provider on the list of POs, we would say this is not allowable because you weren't able to provide payment to a religious organization. During the term of Betsy DeVos, she released guidance that came about after the Trinity versus Missouri Supreme Court case, which was a First Amendment case. And basically it says that we are not allowed to discriminate on the basis of religion of our service providers. So for example, if you are a non-public school and you want to lease some busing or enter into some busing contracts, in the past, you used to not be able to contract with another non-public school who might own buses, right? If my high school, my partner high school owns buses, but I'm a K-8 building and I don't have any buses, I can contract with the high school for busing service because busing is a secular activity, right? It's not religious. So we would see, or we could see payments from Title 4A to a non-public school high school for busing services for a K-8 non-public school who's contracted with that for that non-religious activity.
So, and is there also something within that law that states that whoever the non-secular entity is that they are contracting with, that they can't have any type of administrative or fiscal type of connections with the non-public district, just to ensure the separation?
Right. What they call it is independence.
Internal controls.
Right. So it's called independence in the guidance. That religious entity has to be independent of the school that's requesting the service. So we wouldn't expect to see a non-public school requesting services from their diocese that are paid from federal funds, because in that case, most diocesan non-public school relationships, the diocese has oversight in some form over that non-public school. So we wouldn't expect to see that. When you're looking at things like national conferences, like national associations, they don't have that same level of oversight on the non-public school. So they may be an allowable service provider while the actual diocese is not.
Thanks, Chantel. These have all been really good discussions, and I tell you, you know, the non-public arena is just such a, you know, you can get yourself down into such a big hole with it because of all the different things that you need to consider as you're working with your non-public. So I would say that my biggest recommendation for any new coordinators when you're not sure is to please reach out to your federal programs consultant. And if they're not sure, they're going to reach out to Chantel or Lisa to provide the best and most appropriate guidance for you in those situations. That's what we're here for, and that's our job. We prefer to be more proactive in all the situations instead of having to be reactive later when we're in a monitoring or an audit situation or we've had a complaint that's come through our office. So. Prepare for, prevent, and Morgan, we want to repeat on the respond to. Thanks, Chantel.
Prevent and respond to, yeah.
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 I went ahead and added a link to the ESSER 2 guidance, which does have that phrase in it a few times, and some other things that you can consider when you're looking at for your district or for non-public equitable from ESSER 1. how you can view those different parameters to see if what you're thinking about doing is going to fit. So there's a lot of good things in that FAQ for you.
Okay.
Any other
Yeah, 4
questions? Feel
minutes.
free to add them to the chat or unmute your microphone.
Raise your
I
hand.
figure
Somebody
we
has their
either.
hand up and then they put it down.
Oh, go ahead and put it back up.
Oh, somebody asking a question. I was just going to make a quick comment too that you may, with the EANS program, so with ESSER 2, EANS is kind of separate, right? But there could be a case where you have a non-public school that wants tutoring or teaching services for like a summer program or something that might be allowable, and the ESC is most likely going to be the service provider that we're contracting with ESCs to work on EANS. But there could be a scenario where they ask to work with the LEA to provide teaching or tutoring services. So we're still working out the details on it, but if you do get any questions like that, from a ESC that's reaching out to you about EANS, EANS, you could just email eans@education.ohio.gov, and we can get you the most recent guidance, and whether that's something you even want to embark on, or if it's something that maybe you want to, you don't have an obligation to do anything on EANS. It's a separate program, but we have gotten a few questions from non-public schools saying, how are we going to receive these teaching and tutoring services? Is it only the ESC that's providing them? And so we're working out some of the details, but I'll drop in the email address for EANS in case you guys get any questions about that program.
Yeah, they certainly may be getting ESCs that'll be calling them to do contracts for services, especially when often, our public school districts already have summer learning programs in place. Most likely they're going to be expanding those due to the learning loss that's occurred due to the pandemic. Some of your non-publics may ask if they can't simply participate using their ESSER funds in your summer learning programs that you've put in place, instead of trying to create one of their own for the small handful of students that they have. So just that could happen, definitely.
And there is guidance on that program. I'm debating whether I should put it in here. I don't want to scare you guys. It's guidance for the non-public schools and for the ESCs, but I can maybe drop it in the chat as well. But just know that you're not, you're not the fiscal agent for EANS funds or something like that, but in case you would like to have that guidance, I'll drop it in the chat as well.
Right. You're not responsible and you're not obligated. If you feel as if you have enough on your plate, you're not obligated to provide the services either.
Chantel, we've either answered their questions so well or we've overwhelmed them and they don't know what their questions are anymore. So I'm not seeing much more showing up. Just so everyone knows, we expect questions on this program. The equitable services piece is sort of a small piece of the many things that all of you do, and we understand that. Chantel is always available and always ready with a quick answer. So certainly reach out to her, and if she's not available, I will back her up and you can reach out to me if you come up with questions after
this. And if both of them are not available, I'll try to fumble through it. But
we do thank Diane for inviting us to talk this month in the new Coordinators Academy about equitable services, and thank all of you for making time to be on the call, because really the more help we can provide on the front side, the easier and better it is for everyone.
Yep. Thank you for coming and presenting to our new coordinators. This is not an easy topic, and you're not going to get your heads wrapped around it your first year. It's going to take several years of doing it before it's going to seem, make sense to you, and you're going to know all the next steps. So thank you again for coming today. Well, just hang on just in case there's a few late-minute questions.
Thank you, Lisa and Chantel. Talk to you guys later.
Yes. Thanks, Lisa and Chantel.